Sven, where I want to start is I know you got into heavy music kind of by the way of Nirvana and those kind of things early in your life. But how did you get into horror and kind of the genre of horror, either through literature or through movies?
It was through movies, really. It's a very uh, how would we say emotional thing to me because I used to watch horror movies in the weekends with my grandfather. So this is kind of like the time we had together, you know. So from being super young, I think like 6, 8 years old or whatever,
Okay.
we'd watch horror movies and traumatize me, and I turn out to be the wonderful piece of crap you see in front of you. So it's thanks to my grandfather. We had great times watching all the good old classics in the 80s and all that stuff. So it definitely has a lot of history and sentimental value to me as well, besides the fact that I enjoy it.
Sure. Is there one memory that sticks out then? Because that's quite a young age to get into horror movies.
Yeah, I know. Hence the trauma. No, I think the first one I saw was not even like I would say like a real horror movie, but Jaws. And I remember like being absolutely terrified as soon as I heard the noise of Jaws coming. And it was funny because at that time I was learning to swim and all that kind of stuff in school too. And for some reason, absolutely plausible that there is a giant shark in the pool, who got in there, God knows why, but yeah, there's a shark in the pool. So for a long time, that was a thing. And next to that, I think another one that really marked me, I was really young too, was Return of the Living Dead. A really funny horror movie, really, but when you watch it when you're like 8 or 9 or something, watching the tar man in the basement scene definitely creeped the shit out of me, and it took me a couple of years after that to watch another zombie movie.
Just very quickly, and if you don't want to answer this, you don't have to. But why did your kind of family allow you to watch those movies at such a young age?
I don't know. I was like, these covers look great. At the video store, artwork was a really big thing, which is,
Mm,
I think, why I'm drawn so much to, this kind of artwork as well, doing this band. But
sure.
artwork was a big reason that you go to a video store, you rent a movie. A lot of times you don't even know what it's about, or the art is very misleading. There were plenty of those. And I just got drawn to that, got drawn to, Iron Maiden covers for the same reason
Sure.
back in the day when I was a kid. So it was really the artwork that pulled me in, and then I was like, hey, this stuff's kind of neat.
And you mentioned with Josh, you mentioned something interesting because you mentioned that soundtrack and that very famous noise. And there is a lot of very iconic music and just soundscapes in horror movies. So did that become a factor at some point for you where you started focusing on soundtracks? And also, I mean, John Carpenter is one of the references on the new album. He's a big composer. So did that become an influence?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, John Carpenter is a huge influence for me as well. I wouldn't say, in a death metal way, but we definitely try to get that Carpenter sound and the Carpenter involved songs on the record. At least we try to kind of match at least the cinematic sounds that are in there that Spencer did. We try
Sure.
to match the original scores. And I collect the main vinyls that I collect are not metal vinyls, but I'll collect original soundtracks from horror films because it's kind of crazy if you listen to some of them, even if some of the movies are kind of goofy. Some of these soundtracks are absolutely terrifying, and
Sure.
it's awesome the emotions that you can get from that kind of music.
Is there one, and we don't have to get into it in detail, but is there one soundtrack that you think is very underappreciated in the horror
The
genre
Child's
kind of
Play
thing?
one, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean it is not that goofy of a movie. It gets goofy very quickly after the first two, but the first one has an absolutely terrifying soundtrack. And the same thing for the It remake. That soundtrack
Mm.
is
Now, whenever I mean, this is album number 12. So whenever kind of the whole process for the previous album starts to shut down, you've toured everything. When does the spark come to start on a new album? And I read, I mean, the album is called Vault of Horrors, and I came across some comic books from the 50s. Was that at all an
Of
influence?
course.
Okay, okay.
Of course. It's also a creep show thing. So
Mm,
basically the record is like a anthology series, but instead of being different stories, it's an anthology series about different movies. So that's the whole concept of the record.
okay.
And I was looking for something that could gather all these stories into one, and going through all my creep, Tales from the Crypt stuff, or creep show, I came across that one. So another reference. So nice catch.
And how does the process start then? Does it just start with some musical ideas? Do you write some lyrics down? How does the band kind of start to move towards a new album?
It depends on this last one. It's kind of weird because we started immediately after we finished Maniacal, since we knew, we're not going to be playing a lot of shows because it came out like right during the pandemic still.
Sure.
So we immediately went in writing mode right after, because we were like, might as well, gives us something to do. But basically it's kind of weird. Like the other guys will work on the music on their side, and I'll just start mulching about the general concept first and what I want to do. And then once that is set, I'll only start lyrics once the songs are finished.
Okay.
And then I'll come up with the vocal parts. Once the vocal parts are done, I'll write the lyrics to it, and then we do pre-production. Then we check, do we need to change stuff? Is it good enough? Does the song work? Do we need to change some of the structure of riffs? Or do we change some of the vocals? So it's kind of like an organic back and forth, agile way of working.
But especially with this album, I suppose you have a lot of guest musicians on the album. So did that change the way you operate a little bit, and especially you in terms of vocals and the interplay with other vocalists?
No, not really. I mean, we did everything, and then I also recorded all the songs by myself. And then afterwards, when we had the whole puzzle made, Dave and I sat together and were figuring out which would be the best parts to have the guests come in. And we'd like map it out. We give him my guides as well, but they were completely free to do whatever they wanted, change it, do some other parts, whatever. But we gave them a basic idea, and they could either run with it or do something else.
What made you want to do all those collaborations?
Because no one's ever done it before, and I'm an idiot that likes to try new things. So there we are.
That's the easy answer. And but that's something interesting, especially for a band who's been around like yours. Well, this is album number 12. Like I said, you have a lot of EPs and everything. You've made a lot of music. Is it difficult to walk that line between kind of keeping your identity but also moving things forward?
It's not easy. I mean, especially like that far in the career, and we kind of like have two segments in the career, like pre-Global Flatline and after. And I know, some people want us to play stuff like the old shit, and then others don't. But honestly, we're just like trying to make stuff that we enjoy. We're trying not to repeat ourselves too much. There's definitely the sound of the band is established at this point, I'd say.
Mm.
But we have a box, but we try to, step out of it, or at least make it as large of a box as we can.
Sure. Which collaboration were you most happy with? I mean, it's kind of a cheesy question, but most happy with how it turned out?
I am happy with all of them, to be honest, but so it's kind of hard to pick one. But I think two that really stand out, or three that really stand out to me, is I'd say the Hellbound one with Matt from Cryptopsy. Matt did a great job. Ben Dewar from Shadow did a great job. Alex from The Spies absolutely did what he needed to do on the song, and then Ollie from Archfire as well. Like he's the one guy that completely changed everything and just did his thing, and it's great. I'm gonna die doing that live, but he did an absolutely great job, and definitely added a whole different dimension to that song. So, but everybody did a really, really good job. I'm stoked on everybody.
And you mentioned you've recorded everything by yourself as well. So in the live setting, I suppose that's what it's going to be, right? Or are
Um,
you planning on getting some guest
uh,
appearances as well?
well, whenever we will play or tour when the guests are around, I'm hoping they're gonna help me out.
Fair enough.
But other no, I'll be doing the parts, and I won't just do what I recorded, because when some of the stuff got changed, for example, I have to do whatever's on the record.
Sure.
So I'll do my I give it my college try to get it as close as possible.
But this brings me to my next point, which is it's a very intense album. It's very, I mean, just immediately from the drums to even your vocals. So, for instance, "The Shape of Hate," there's that really fast bit, and vocally, and basically musically in general, how challenging was this record to make?
Very. It's very. I mean, we have a new guitarist in Danny from Iceland, and I don't know what the hell they put in the milk in Iceland, but that guy's fucking nuts. So he wrote a lot of crazy shit, and then of course Ken has to one up himself every album. So here we are. So a lot of things in the studio were like, well, this is gonna suck to play live. Well, I mean, that's a problem for future me, right? So this was, it's a problem for future me was basically the saying when we were recording. But we already played some of the songs live. They're totally fine. But we definitely didn't make it easy on ourselves.
No, I can imagine. You've been always somebody I think who's been very I don't know if specific is the right word, but detail oriented with the way you use your voice. So, were there any were there any sorry with Nederland, were there any things that you focused on specifically for this album vocally?
Well, it was a really cool process for this one because I had already like kind of done pre-production on over half the album, I think, and
Okay.
then the other half I didn't have time for. And I wrote the rest of the stuff in the studio, and then it's definitely the longest I've spent recording a record. We were also, just in general, we were at the studio for 6 weeks with Dave, just recording. Mixing
Okay.
was another 2 weeks, but 6 weeks recording, and I think I spent about 4 hours per song,
Okay.
just one song a day in a row. So however, I guess 10 days on vocals, which is a lot, like twice as much as I'm used to.
Okay.
And I mean, we would just record everything in one go with Dave, just go over the parts, and then he'd have ideas, we'd change some stuff. And he also had ideas where he wanted me to double things and which kind of voices to use and whatnot. And there was a lot of creative process while recording. So it was a very fun experience. And Dave really knows what he wants. He knows the band and what the band should sound like. So it was super fun.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. Now, I read somewhere that Golgothan, one of the songs on the record, was inspired by Clerks, which is obviously not a horror movie. Is that right?
It's not Clerks. I mean, Metal
Okay.
Sucks need to get their shit straight.
Yeah,
It's
that I read that somewhere. So,
yeah, yeah. No, it's not about a horror movie, but it's about a Kevin Smith movie. It's not about
ah,
Clerks, but it's about the Golgothan, the shit demon in Dogma.
okay.
Every record has a song about poo poo, so what movie has shit about shit? So the choice is limited.
Oh, thank you for clearing that up then. But whenever you mentioned you only start writing the lyrics once you have the music. So what is it in, for instance, that specific song where you kind of heard that Dogma influence, or where you thought, oh, that might be an interesting direction to go in?
Well, it's literally there's not a lot of movies about shit, so your choice is just limited. There's the Golgothan in Dogma, or there's Milo, and Milo was way too much out there for me to even touch. So we went with the Golgothan.
Okay.
I thought it was pretty fucking funny. The
No,
lyrics,
fair.
maybe this is a nice little extra to know. I started writing the lyrics and I finished them in the time that our guitarist Daniel took a shit in the studio. So my goal was like, song about poop. Dan is taking a shit. I have to write this and finish it before he's done shitting, and I did. So there we go.
Fair enough. Now, the last thing I'd like to talk about is, and I looked at your touring schedule. You're playing Europe in spring, and then you're going over to the US and Canada in the summer. It almost feels like, and I wonder what your perspective is on this. It almost feels like you're touring like a band that's where everybody's still 20 years old. Well, how do you keep the energy to do everything and go on those big tours?
Stem cells, man. No, it's just keeping in shape. Honestly, it's obviously you feel it more than when you were 20.
Sure.
I don't party after shows and shit, so I keep to myself and make sure I sleep enough. And it's just making sure you're in shape, try to eat properly, exercise, stuff like that.
But what makes that I mean, this is coming from somebody who's never been on stage performing for people, but what makes that hour and a half on stage so special then? What makes that so addictive?
I think it's the dopamine and the adrenaline you get from being on stage. It's very energetic music, and I'm a calm person off stage, but on stage I do what I do. I get angry. Like Patrick O'Houlihan, you got to get angry.
You gotta
You got to
get
get mean. So you do that kind of stuff, and it helps, and it's just the energy you get from the crowd and you give to the crowd is something that it is really awesome, and you can't get from anything else.
And I mean, I've heard people, performers speak about kind of almost feeling like the person on stage is a separate identity. I don't know if that's too far to go with you, but how do you feel about kind of the person you become on stage?
Apparently, I get scary to some people, so I don't know. I mean, I don't see myself as a scary person. I'm just an idiot that likes to make screamy noises, but it's cool. I mean, I think it's a lot of adrenaline, a lot of energy, and you're playing really extreme music. So I think that's how you present it. But it's all fun too. You got to have fun with the crowd. It's the interaction that you have. I'm still me. I'm just a bit more aggressive, I guess.
Fair enough. Last question. You mentioned the translation from album to live is going to be a bit tricky, but you've already performed some songs live. What have you noticed about how the songs go over? And because as I mentioned, it is quite an intense album, and it sounds like it would do really well in a live setting.
That went really well. We did it on the 70,000 tons of metal. So we had like 2 days to practice them before when we played in Mexico. The first couple times we played them was interesting. It was, we haven't played these songs as a band ever. So, but after like one day of rehearsing and then playing in some stuff and sound check, everything was fine. And, people seem to love this stuff. Some of the songs came over really heavy. So I think everybody's in for a treat.
Sounds great. Sven, may I thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
You're welcome.